Series on the family, I want to focus specifically on those family moments that you spend together and the value of those moments. The question is, in a time that is so busy, there are so many things that compete for our time, that protecting, treasuring those moments becomes a real challenge. So I want you to think about the question of when. When do you set aside time where you can spend with your family to cultivate the relationship, to talk about the journey of the day, the experiences at school or at work, and together share life? I want to read a passage for you from Ephesians chapter 5, verse 16. It's in the Christological passage, which means this is a section of scripture that's focusing in on Jesus and some different truths about Christ and the importance of his presence in our life. And in verse 16, the Apostle Paul writes, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. Well, we have to make the best use of the time to cultivate our relationship with Jesus, and that certainly takes time. But it's recognizing the shortage of time, that in this day, having a sense of urgency to build and deepen that relationship with Jesus now needs to be considered as very critical. I want to take that story and I want to apply it to the family. You know, when we're raising our kids, we recognize how quickly they grow up. And we don't like to think about the fact that their time at home with us is a very short time, relatively speaking. And so I remember thinking that when each of our children reached the age of 9, that they had spent over half of their life at home with us, and that they would be leaving once they graduated from high school and forming their own lives with college and work and family. And I remember what an arresting thing that was to think about my children growing up and no longer being under my roof. That's exciting too. And when you reach that point and you launch your children out into the world, it's a thrill that you can only fully appreciate whenever you experience it. But between birth and that time, whenever they leave the home, we need to have those family moments that we treasure, that we protect, and to protect the plan that we put in place to have those moments. So, when do you set aside time to be with your kids, or and with your spouse? Set aside time to be with your spouse, because time is such a critical element in the richness of our relationship. And the other thing I want to remind you is that the time we spend is with each other in family is one part of the equation, but the other part of the equation is the richness of that time. We all know that you can be present with someone in a room, but not be mentally or emotionally present. You can be somewhere else. And so while we need to spend time with each other, and there's no substitute for that, we also need to maximize that time by being focused on each other, by listening well when our children are telling us about their day, or when they are sharing some problem or some question that they're troubled by. The richness of the time is critical, just like the abundance of the time. You know, when I was a kid, my dad had a habit of coming home every day from work around 6, and we would sit down at the dinner table at 6:30. And around that dinner table, we would share life. We'd call it that. We just called it dinner and dinner together. But we would sit around that table and we would share stories just quite naturally from the day. And some of them would be family stories, other friends' stories, or school stories, or stories that came from work that dad had experienced that day, or what mom had done in her day, taking care of the home, preparing for the family to come home that evening. But we truly were sharing life. And those are some of the most treasured times to look back on for me.